Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, a podcast devoted to helping you overcome challenges in your life that prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. Each episode features interviews with people from all walks of life about their journey of self-development and the principles they utilize to overcome their fears to achieve their desired outcome. Ready to be enlightened? Here's your host, Ken Primus.
That's exactly how life should be.
Should be.
You're in good company.
Okay, excellent. Here we go. Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, this is my custom to welcome our guests. They're coming and spending a couple of things very expensive, and I want to thank them and honor them for that time. 24 hours is being given to every one of us, and Doc is here. Dr. Cooney is here to spend some of it with us. And we want to rightfully honor her and thank her for it, because that's expensive stuff. Once it's spent, it's spent. And so the other is the journey and her life, if you will. And that journey that she has walked through and a part of, it taught her a bunch of stuff. And we really want to thank her for coming and sharing, allowing us the opportunity to get into that, because that journey has deposited a couple of things in her that we want access to. Wisdom, knowledge, insights, all of those beautiful things. We want to dance with it. Why? Because we want to become better human spirits while we're here on this planet. We want our souls to be expanded. And so we want to thank you, Doc, for coming to Threads of Enlightenment to expand our soul. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken. It's so beautiful. And you have such a peaceful resonance in your voice. And I can tell that the people that are listening to you really get to touch a place of quiet, calm, and it sparks ingenious thinking.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We laughed a little as to where that came from. And one of the questions that I usually ask everyone that comes, Doc, because it's important to me. And I want the listeners also to understand something about their life. Don't be selfish. Your life is not all about you. It's about others.
Yes.
And the question that I always ask everyone is, how do you serve mankind?
Beautiful question. The short answer is, for 30 years, every single day, I sit here. Before COVID, it was more live with people. Now we're live with cyberspace and people, which is, beautiful in and of itself. For 30 years almost, I have been sitting with people, helping them alleviate their depression, identify their trauma, reduce their anxiety, and also dissolve their negativity and create a life based in choice, self-will, freedom, and joy, hopefully.
That is wonderful, Doc. I think as a progression of all of that, how you explained it, that progression is summed up in this freedom. And so here we are. Let's celebrate freedom, Doc. We want to go back and go into your life. And because I tell people, as we're moving through life, we have locations that we reside for a short while as we land on this planet. And one of the very first location is that we call it, or give it the title, home, family. At this location, Doc, we're going to learn a couple of things. We're going to start learning about communication skills. We're going to learn our relationships with self and others, relationship with food, money, everything. Everything begins right here. And this is the beginnings of our beginnings. What was your family like?
Well, you teach what you need to learn. Let's put it that way. So I grew up in New York in the late 60s, early 70s. And, I grew up in knowing how to play street ball. You had to keep your mind about you back in those days. And it's kind of similar now. But I lived in a very, unfortunately, violent environment with what looked like a lot of love and materialistic rewards, if you would, and also, good education, those sorts of things. But behind the scenes, which is familiar to a lot of people, there was a lot going on that in this day and age would easily been CPS related, police called, potentially me removed from the home. But that wasn't my lot in life. I learned how to play the school of hard knocks and play, hardball, street ball, and I learned how to survive. And not so well growing up into my teenage, early 20 years. But I was fortunate in my early 20s. I've had some pretty spiritual, existential experiences that changed the course of my life. And I'm glad it did, because I don't think I would be talking to you here today, Ken, if I had kept going on the trajectory that I was going, which was more just like taking the abuse, depressions, anxieties, and traumas that I lived with and internalized them about myself, and then used a lot of drugs and alcohol at the time to numb the pain and not deal with what I show people how to deal with every day. I had to learn myself. And I figured in my early 20s that I probably wasn't the only one that was struggling at the way that I was struggling. And even if I was, there was probably at least one other person that I could probably help.
Yeah.
And that's the person that I had been looking for 30 years.
Yeah,
And
that
they have come.
you know, I always tell people we're our first client. You know, I don't care what you do. We are the first one because we have to look at the tools. I tell people if you're a teacher, you have to go through the things that you're going to teach. And so once you've gone through it, you're familiar with all the crazy things that one will need to do and see. You go through the dark spaces, you become familiar with those potholes, if you will, and so that you're able to guide someone through it faster so that they don't have to go through all that pain. And so here you are. I'm from, you know, a New York girl and stickball. I know I'm from Queens, you know. So
Ah, I kind of had a feeling you might resonate with that New York.
yeah, I know some of that stuff. And I used to tell people back in the day, abuse was like a Olympic sports. And so today they don't know anything about that. But that Olympic sport back in the day, some
That
people
is
were
good.
pretty good at it. They had gold medals, and mom and dad, some of them were pretty good. So here you are. You grew up in the old school way, which was, you know, what is a nice,
School of
kind
hard
word?
knocks.
Yeah, school of that's the terminology. School of hard knocks, and you
If you didn't come
were
home for dinner, you'd get whacked.
yeah, and you got knocked a couple of times in that school of hard knocks.
If you didn't smile or eat at the table, you got whacked.
Yeah. So with all of that whacking going on, as they say now, how, and I know you mentioned it briefly, you just said you survived, and that's the first stage, if you will, in our managing the trauma.
Yes.
We put ourselves in a survival mode and we began to tell ourselves stories as young individuals in order for us to cope with what is going around our
Correct.
life. As you were, what did that look like to you, Doc? That survival mode. Some of us pull away, we become quiet. Some of us, we do all kinds of things to survive. What was your modus operandus, way by which you survived in that turmoil?
It's a great question, and it's not going to be the best answer, but it has changed since then. But originally, I survived by escaping and dissociating. That's how I managed the trauma. And on one level, like I said, it was drugs and alcohol. But on another level, the positive side was sports. I swear to you that my 16 years of playing soccer
Mm-hmm.
really got my aggression out, got the feelings pent up inside out, and I was pretty darn good. And I was very physical, and I swear I'm still very physical. First thing I do every morning, besides after getting my coffee, is going to exercise, and I move my body somehow, whether it's with my trainer on Zoom or I go to kickboxing or something. That has been a steady since I was very young. And that has kept my mind and body and spirit pretty clear. So physically is a big thing for me. Talk about freedom. When you're experiencing trauma, a lot of times from the, egregious traumas of, let's say, sexual assault, where you literally can't move at times or you can't do anything different and you wish you could, to just being in a abusive relationship. And I don't mean just as in to lessen the power of it, the intensity of it, but there's different levels, right? Abuse is still abuse, but some experiences are more egregious than others. And so I had to do the physical to balance out some of that, and then the escapism to balance out some of what I was dealing with. And then when I literally left New York and went to Arizona, I went out west and I started my own personal work. I started working with children in a youth crisis shelter. I started serving and I started giving back. And that really is what woke me up, that I had something that I could give to people. And that is a listening ear, a compassionate heart, and a knowledge. I don't know how I had this knowledge, but it was intrinsic to me that nothing was permanent that I was experiencing, that this could all change. And I could determine how I wanted my reality to be. Took a long time to actually cultivate that
Yeah, it takes time.
from the trauma, but just having that little bit of insight, forethought, drive to take care of myself physically, but also to take care of myself therapeutically. And then I also went to school, and I was very fortunate that way. And my father really, really helped, because he did pay for my education, all of it except my doctorate. That's what I did myself. But the rest of it, he paid for. I am very, very grateful for that. So even though I had a lot of trauma, and I always say, because it's my story, so I can make a joke of it. You know, I took one for the treat, you know, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical violence, emotional violence, psychological violence, spiritual violence. I mean, it just ran the gamut. And I would never do it again. I'm never taking one for the team again. Picking it up in this lifetime, and that has been my path and purpose and mission since a very young age.
Talk to me. You had mentioned that you had some spiritual awakening, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about? Because all of us, the road that you talked about, we do that, you know, to manage. Some of us disassociate, some of us,
Right.
whatever we put in place. A lot of us hit the drugs and party and mask all of that because we don't want to deal with it. It's overwhelming and hide there for many years. Some of us never come out. You know, we lose many people there. But something spiritual from a lot of people that I know that have been in there took that route. Something spiritual was the tool that was used to jerk them out, kind of slap them, if you will.
Sure.
What did that look like in your life?
It's a beautiful question. And it's really the crux of everything that I have done on this planet in my 55 years thus far. And I will keep going. So I think the one very, very strong positive, there's a couple of positives, like the education my father gave me and he paid for. That's a very big positive. Like I was very lucky to have that because it really kept me alive. The thing on my mom's side was the spiritual quality. She's a second generation Italian immigrant. My father was a second generation Irish immigrant. And not that that matters, but about the spiritual, but my Catholic side and the Italian side was very, very Catholic. Right. So I'd go to, as a kid, I would be at more, what were they called? Prayer meetings. Prayer meetings. Where they'd be laying on the hands and singing and praying and crying and people were getting well. And I didn't know what was going on. But I felt such the power there that like I would cry.
Yeah.
Not that that means everything, but it would just come out. It was like something spoke to my soul when in those meetings and prayer meetings. And my family, my mom and my aunt were and my grandmother, their mother, was very prominent in that spiritual. I say spiritual particularly, even though they followed a certain religious path, it was more spiritual for me. And I remember being in church with my grandmother, kneeling down in the pew. And I was about 7 years of age, and she said something, and it pulled my whole energy toward her. And I looked up, and it was that moment that I knew at 7 that finding what that meant was going to be a part of my destiny. And she used the word soul. My grandmother was the kind of 4 foot nothing Italian lady that just went to church morning, noon, and night and prayed for us all, and had the rosary beads around her hand, and that was just her life. And I'd walk her back and forth to church all the time. And when she would say and recite all the priest's prayers, as well as the people in the pew, the guests, let's say, the people that would attend church would also say, and she made up her own words, and it was soul. She kept using the word soul. And fast forward 20 something years, and I graduated with my dissertation and doctorate in psychology, with my research project being about finding and forming your spiritual identity through a technique out of New Zealand called cooperative inquiry. And that was all about bringing in the spiritual to unfold your soul print, which is the uniqueness of our spiritual character, just like our fingerprint is unique to us. And it pretty much, we all have a spiritual soul print. And leaving that soul print and expressing it on the lips of this reality is, in some turn, what my research was doing, what I lived to aspire to be, and what my grandmother, whether she knew it or not, set out to introduce me to. And that started a series of, that moment in church started a series of dreams that I had alone in my room at night, where it was almost like, this is what I'm going to say, you can't tell me how crazy you are, because when I tell you this, you're going to tell me how crazy I am, but I know you're going to say, I understand. That's why we're talking. Like literally, I'll never forget it. In my childhood bedroom in my mom's house in New York, my childhood home, I remember like having a dream and like, but I was awake and the whole world started opening, like the veil of what we see as the sky and all that stuff, the stars and the sun and the moon. And then I started seeing angels and entities and some darker entities and some lighter entities and all different world religions and their associated icon or something like that. Jesus, Buddha, Guanyin, those sorts of things. Angels, like I said. And I was downloaded information. And I can't really say exactly what I was downloaded at the time, but after that moment, I just kept getting more insights about things and seeing the world differently. And I feel like that was from God, and God was, I want to say divining. Whatever the God of my understanding was in that moment was just divining where some of my gifts that come out during my work and my career over these 30 years. So that's what started it.
Yeah, that's a powerful story and image, because something always happens to make us aware of the spiritual aspect. And once we are aware of that, we can never go back, if you will. You just can't forget it. You just can't.
Once you have that, once you have that experience, and then over and over and over again, the doubt goes away.
Yeah. And you're able to, once the veil, if you will, is released, and you can see, because I remember growing up in the church as well, and there's these two this prophet and this servant is there with him, and the guy is fighting. He's like, hey, there's so many of them against us and whatever. And the prophet, I think it's Elijah, said to him, he says, open his eyes, God, so he can see what we have. He said, there's more with us than more with them. And that veil was removed. And the prophet saw, the servant saw the army of God standing right there in the skies. And, so there is a veil that once removed, we have access to see the other side. And once we see the marvelous things there's much pain, there's much joy. There's the dark side and the other side as well. So you have to, when it's open up and you're aware, you have an opportunity to partake and dance in both fields and both worlds, if you will.
Right.
So go ahead, Don.
Yes, exactly right. And that is what I've been doing my whole life. And thank you for that explanation, because I've been dancing in both those worlds. And that's what I feel like I do. I dance in this physical world, but I also, and we all have this access. It's just whether you practice it or not, or whether you believe it, or if it's your choice, really. You just, and so like we're in a physical body having a physical experience, but also we're a spiritual body, obviously having a spiritual experience. We're a spiritual soul, where the energy of the ATP that makes up our body and every cell of our body also makes up the earth, the sky, the moon, the stars, the world, the earth. And so even though we have a body that is kind of formed and structured, we're still a spirit and a soul that can touch the sky, so to speak, energetically, and the trees, and perceive all that information. And so it's not just a separation in a physical body from the spiritual. And a lot of times that's really what I do with people, is help them balance the physical and the spiritual and awaken their spiritual, because most people have gotten away from that, just like with life getting lifey and dealing with one thing after another: kids, spouses, life, presidential elections, wars, dramas, just everything.
Yeah, the journey is just to remember who we are. That's it. And because we are inside this mechanism called the body, and but that doesn't negate us having access to anything. It's just what keeps me legal on this planet. That's it. I can access some psychologists will say the quantum realm, and you hear a lot of that. I can access that realm through different practices and ways. And in the church, we will call that realm the heavenly places. And so it's just a different language to describe location. Those that are not familiar, they're looking at it from that psychologist point of view, they call it that. The church the people that are looking at it from a spiritual point of view will call it that. Same location. So both of us can access it. And so here you are, Doc. You started I love it, your life, because you went to Arizona. Arizona is one of those places that you can get into meditation and spiritualism really quick over there because of how that state is and what they do. How did you begin to navigate to working with the kids? Because you went to school, you said you went to school and then you started
Yeah.
working with kids. How did that process took place?
I started working for a company in Arizona while I was going to school called Prevention Prehab of Arizona. And they had a child crisis shelter that is one of those places where they take kids out of violent home and give them a safe place to stay where nobody knows where they are, especially the people that maybe are their guardians, parents even that are part of the abuse. And they stay for sometimes a couple of months, but they're just taken out of the house because it's not safe. And no one knows where these places are. And that's where I was stationed for the first year of my working there in Arizona. I actually joined the Jesuit Volunteer Corps after college because I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. And then I graduated with a psychology degree. And then, so I wanted to volunteer in the field, let's say, for a year to find out where I wanted to go. And kids were always, I was that kid that needed a safe place to go. And I never had a safe place to go. So I gave back and gave kids a safe place and basically did that there for a while. Then I moved to a residential treatment center in that same company, went to get my master's in counseling while I was doing that, perfecting, my skill set that way. And then, moved on to my doctorate because I realized that this is where I wanted to be. And I had a very good success rate. Like people listened to me. I made sense to people. I cared and I wanted what's best for them. And I wanted them away from the violence because I know what it could do. The escapism, the drugs, the alcohol, the sexual promiscuity, the depression, the harmful behaviors, the unsafe behaviors, the binging, all the stuff. I was like, boy, if I could interrupt and give them, these kids, something that would give them hope, because I needed that. And I didn't have that. I did have the education, right? But I didn't have the hope at the level that I needed it. And I did somewhat spiritually, but I had to cultivate it more in my adult years. And those early experiences really helped. I don't know if I didn't have the spiritual experiences and the education that I had from my family system, if I would have created the same life that I created today. In fact, I know I actually wouldn't. I actually know I wouldn't have made it.
Let me ask you this question, Doc. As here you are, and you're in school, you're dealing with the kids, and you're seeing, and you're that conduit because of your past, and that you became that conduit, but more so an advocate for them. As you're studying and you're putting all this data, getting all the different things and moving through your career, and seeing the pain of trauma in relationship to your data, how did it begin to change you?
It changed me so, well, one, it's let me see how vulnerable children are. So it's soft. It was like, wait a second, why is this happening to kids? Like, I mean, that's just a big question right there. Like kids they're so small. They're so young. They're little. Maybe they don't listen. I didn't listen sometimes, but do they deserve to be capital punished?
Yeah.
And treated derogatorily and abused and intimidated and threatened and hair pulled and arms beat and legs kicked. That's not everybody's experience, I realize, but it's a lot of people's experience. And I was so against that because I was that kid that everybody knew something was going on. Nobody did anything. I realize now that they didn't know what to do. I get the world is different now, but I became that person for those people that knew what to do. And that healed me. And it created a drive inside of me to help. That's it. Help, to care, to be that voice of somebody that could empower them, support them, and that they would never, ever feel alone again. If I could be that person where I could take away some of their loneliness, preventing some suicides, preventing some diseases being created, preventing some poor decisions, getting a female or a male in a dangerous position, then I felt like I was doing God's work. I didn't believe that I didn't believe, and I still don't, that the violence and the abuse that is allowed on this planet is anywhere near what we are supposed to have out there.
Yeah.
It's just it's insane.
Yeah. And it tells you the relationship of others, what they have with themselves to be that way. And so there's a lot of people in pain. The abusers are in pain as well, much more so than the folks that they are abusing. And so it's really a fascinating exchange and stuff. So here you are. And Doc had mentioned, guys, that as she was serving, the serving healed her as well. That's why I always tell people, hurry up and become a servant. It's a process, but it's a cost. But when you get there, you continue your healing at a different level. It's really a fascinating thing to see and to be a part of, because that healing is like deep inside the soul, where joy comes in and replaces. I mean, it's some deep stuff. So hurry up and serve. And because when you're serving, you are doing it from a certain place, and the receiver, the effect that it has on them, and then the reciprocal back to you is a powerful thing. And I tell people, when you do that, when you serve, you get to see karma, because karma is just a return of what you're giving out. And so if you're giving out good and you're serving, and that karma, you see it like boom, 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 and it is one of the most beautiful things.
It
But
really is.
if you're serving pain, karma with pain, what it does, it'll circle for a little while, and it'll build up and build up, and that individual will think they've gotten away with things. And then one day there's a visitor on the door that knocks and shows up and
Yep.
strip them of everything that they ever did, because that karma is not there for anything else but justice. And so it is there to reward your behavior. And it's also there to allow you, once you are getting that reward, it allows you the opportunity to self-correct. You will have to go inverted and go in and start investigating this karma, this teacher, this justice that is here. And it'll give you an opportunity to say, okay, I need to change my life. I need to be more empathetic. I need to be whatever. And if you choose the latter, to not change, it will break you, and you will never be the same. And so karma is an interesting law. It's a law. You know, you've heard it from the religious side. You hear people say, God, it says, the scripture says, God is not mocked. Don't be fooled. It says, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he reap. That's some other places. Some religion will call that karma. Some people call it in the Bible sowing and reaping. It's a law that is not moved by your emotion and your crazy behavior,
No.
but it will. And the thing about it is, the
I love
judgment in the reward is built in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's built in already. So if you do bad, it's built in. If you do good, it's built in. So I think that's what God put in place, so that we would be respectful of each other.
I love that.
You know, but that's just another thing.
Great way of describing karma. And there's an energy modality that I've worked with for most of my career called theta healing, like the theta and gamma brain waves.
Mm-hmm.
Also working with the delta and alpha brain waves. But the theta healing basically says the same thing about the law of karma. So I'm kind of nice. It's nice to hear that, because I don't think it's as negative as some people think.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think it's really, really positive. And I know that the law of cause and effect and the law of karma. Did you notice my New York accent when I say cause?
Yep.
Cause and effect. You want some coffee? Cause and effect. You can take the New Yorker out of the girl. I mean, you can take the girl out of New York.
But it's still in there.
Yes. I've worked really hard. Everybody always notices, like, you don't sound like you're from New York.
Yeah, if you listen, it's there.
Yeah.
So
if you're from New York, you can hear it.
Yeah, talk to me about some of those tools. You mentioned one of them. Talk to me about those tools that you brought into your life, because this is all it is. Once we are awakened to the fact that we are a little special, and we have to deal with certain things and our personality and our drama and our trauma and all these different things, to begin to heal, we need assistance. And for me, it was a meditation that came in, one of the most powerful tools for me, that rescued me, because it afforded me the ability to become a designer, a chooser of the thoughts that I gave permission to give birth to. So I became a designer of my life as to how I want my life to be. And when I disconnected from the default programming in my life, and we welcome you guys to come and learn how to deprogram yourself. Doc, what tools did you bring into your life to assist you to change and cause you to become more loving to yourself, more accepting, more forgiving of those wonderful things that we want? What tools did you bring?
Yeah, you asked such great questions, Ken. Thank you for that. And it's really making me think. Well, this is going to kind of go back. What I'm going to say now is going to go back to when we first started talking, which is, I think, really lovely full circle. You were talking about programs, the programs of belief systems and things.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially what I learned early on, somewhere mostly in my 20s, I should say, I learned that, how do I say this? That there were certain programs that were developed inside my brain and working in my subconscious, like the back of my brain, that were coming out in the front of my behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't congruent to what I was thinking or being or in alignment with my own integrity. And so I started looking at that. And a lot of it at the time was in relationship. And I remembered somewhere in my early 20s, I went through this breakup, as you do. And it was an amicable breakup. But I had feelings that were not amicable. I had, anger, shame, rage, even pain and hurt and sadness. And I was looking at myself, or, how do you look at yourself? I was like, what's going on in here? Like, This is amicable. You chose this. You and the person chose this. It's okay. And so one day, literally, I pulled over to the side of the road in Northern California on the 101 freeway, 101 North. And I started screaming at the top of my lungs, right? And it was about this relationship. And I was just ending. And I was like, talking to myself, but it's amicable. Why are you so angry? So I kept asking myself, like, where have I felt this before? What is this reminding me of? Because I realized at that time that the trigger, my feelings, were so big and beyond the situation that it didn't match. Yeah. It was at that moment that I realized something else was going on. And essentially, long story short, I created in that moment, and I'll go on with the story in a moment, what's known as the ROAR technique, which is my signature series, if you will, about how to identify subconscious programs and release them. And in that moment on the side of the road, as I was questioning myself, putting my hands on my body, I'm like, okay, this is a breakup. Go back, feel yourself getting younger and younger, littler and littler, smaller and smaller, back to, this is my old hypnotherapy stuff, back to a time in your childhood where you felt the same or similar feeling, might be with a different person, some sort of breakup, blah, 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 relationship. And it brought me back to my parents. And it brought me back to watching them interact, which I could definitely say was beyond dysfunctional. But at the time, that's all they knew. Right. But as a kid, I was absorbing that and watching that. And I was like, oh, okay. So he is sarcastic to her and shames her. She gets mad, responds to him. This is all what's going in my head as I'm watching them at like 5 years of age. She gets mad at him and takes it out on him. Then he gets mad at her. And then dinner becomes this fight. And then they're throwing bread at each other and throwing F-bombs everywhere. And then what I decided was that that's what love was. Love is abuse. Love is anger. Love is sarcasm. Love is gaslighting. Love is being mean to the person you're married to. Love is being reactive. And so then I had to go back even further and be like, okay, if that's what I decided about love, what did I decide about me in love? And I decided that I deserve the same love in that way. And that relationship, fast forward to my 20s, from 5 years of age watching my parents argue or just sit at the dinner table and argue, which I then knew is love and now realize isn't. I created the ROAR technique, which was the program of I'm really unworthy of true love and unlovable. That's what I learned just from watching my parents. None of it was true. I just took that on from watching, feeling, sensing their dynamic and made all these conclusions in my brain. So here I go from 5 until 25 and I go through this breakup, and I break up with somebody, which is good because we weren't, and it was mutual, but I still felt unlovable, unworthy, and love was still a mystery to me. And I found out that love was also hate. I have these belief systems, and hate is love, love is hate. And that's called a dual belief system. If you believe that love is hate or have anything to do with love, if hate has anything to do with love, you are giving a mixed message to the universe, and the universe is giving you a mixed message back. Law of karma, cause and effect.
Yeah.
And so I embarked on this program of creating the ROAR technique, creating classes about the ROAR technique, and helping people identify their subconscious programs that they made predominantly from 7 back to birth, as far as they can remember. Everybody at first can't go back to age 7. Sometimes it takes a little bit. Sometimes they can only do a teenage year or a young 20s. Eventually we'll get them back there, because the ego eventually softens and realizes that when you're asking these type of questions with the ROAR technique, what does that remind you of? Go back to a time in your life where you had the same or similar feeling. Where do you feel that in your body? What would your body speak if it could say? And you find the pattern. And the pattern highlights the program. And then you swap the program out with a virtue, right? And what love truly is. And then you can, through the theta healing, you can change down to the mitochondria and then out. And so then your behavior becomes aligned with what you're putting out and what the universe is giving you. And that's what I strive for, and I strive with people. So that's how the tools worked for me.
Yeah, and that's what the tools will do. It helps you to realign all of your old programs that you have in you that has subconsciously. I tell people this, Doc, that's I've learned, because I'm looking at me as a individual, and I tell people, if I study me, I'm also studying you. So one of the things I tell people that I notice, and especially kids do it because they have access to the subconscious mind or the soul faster than us adults. But when that soul makes a decision, it locks in and it will govern our life. We will change our behavior to make that a reality. When that soul, and I take this example from here. Again, I go to the Bible a lot of times because it has a lot of the stories that will pull these things out. There's this woman, and with the issue of blood, she's sick. She's going out spending money to get healed. And then one day it says that she spent all her money and she's not getting any healthier from the healthcare system of the day. And then she heard that Jesus Christ, this guy out there, is healing people, or people are getting healed. And the scripture says, she said within herself, if I could touch the hem of his garment, I'm going to get what I want. So that thing hit me like a brick, because that means that someone inside of her, she said it, the one inside there, she said it. And then what she did was she took the steps necessary to get her thing. You notice she didn't want to talk to him. She didn't want to say hi. She wasn't interested in a handshake. She didn't want nothing. She didn't want nothing from him except to touch the hem. Wow. She didn't want to be engage in a conversation. Right. She didn't want nothing else but to reach that. And so if you look at the story, it tells us that she actually was pushing against the crowd. There was some resistance that she had in going to what she wanted. She broke through those resistance and she touched the hem, just like she said, that inner, that soul said. And Jesus turns around and he says, who touched me? That's a powerful story, because there are tons of people touching him. And the disciples turned around and said to him, what's wrong with you, dude? Everybody's touching you. And he said, no, who touched me? And she turned around and she says, I did. So how do we touch God? Because it's a fascinating story. God turned around and says, who touched me? So we have to touch him to get the response that we want. Because he turned around and said, who touched me? He's just being himself. So get purposeful in what you want, guys. It'll change your life. You're a creator. Get purposeful. Decide in yourself, within yourself. That's why when people say to me, New Year's coming, I'm going to lose weight and whatever, I'm like, I look at them and I say, yeah, whatever. Because your soul didn't make that decision. Once your soul makes that decision, it becomes a reality. It has to, because he doesn't care about all the other thing. He deals with reality. He wants this to be accomplished. And what happens, because we are energy, he sends out the beacon, if you will, and that beacon will bring others in our space, the energy like that will cause you and I to accomplish what we just said we want to accomplish. Yes. Any other stuff like that, you're wasting your time. So you need to get in meditation. However you get there, there, because that's where you need. So you, at a young age, said this.
get
Yeah.
there.
You said that. You saw that. You made an observation
Hmm.
based on the data that was being presented to you by your parents. And that observation governed your life until you question it at 25 years old.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
it's amazing because I had a very similar experience to that, not surprising, at 20 something years of age. You said get purposeful with your life, where I had a similar experience like that about getting purposeful. And
mhm,
I really was going to cash it all in and say, that's it, I'm done. I was underneath all my trauma and depression. And I remember walking out in San Francisco at night in front of a bus, ready to cash it in.
mhm,
Like, I'm done. I step out in front of the bus, turn and face it, saw the lights, and then something touched my right shoulder, which I can still feel every time I talk about this story. And it pulled me back to the street corner, the sidewalk. Bus passes. I'm standing on the sidewalk. I'm looking around. No one's there. And it was at that moment, and I can say this because it's my story. I'm not making light of suicide by any means because I've lost people to suicide and it's been very painful. But I said, well, God, I can't even kill myself, right? What do you have in store for me?
yeah, that's,
And that's really what I got purposeful in that moment because I couldn't be the only person that stepped in front of a bus at 20
yeah,
something underneath the pain of their own trauma, anxiety, depression, violent childhood, and abuse. So I was like, okay, if I'm not supposed to be dead, I better get purposeful and get driven and decide what I'm going to do. And from that moment on, it has been about living my roar, writing books, working with people, doing meditations, doing classes, and whoever God sends me, I work with because I don't know, I didn't say that correctly, but it's like there's an energy of just like I know whoever comes, it's somebody I'm supposed to work with.
yeah,
Just like I know speaking with you today it's supposed to happen.
yeah, I believe that. And you become purposeful once you locate your purpose. One becomes purposeful. And so when God has work for you to do, he has work for you to do. And there's nothing you can do about it because he says he will lead you in the way that you should go. And I've learned a couple of things as you're talking, Doc, and it became clarified to me as to the adults. What makes us get in touch with that soul is when we have come to the end of our rope, when we have come to the end of our ability, if you will. Because I remember many times in my life when I came to the end of my ability was when my soul made a decision and it came to pass. And so many of you, how we say today, when you've done all that you've done and you've come to the end of your rope, that's when you need to sit down and get in touch with yourself and say, what is it I need? And he will answer you and you will go from there. God will show up because he wanted to talk to you a long time ago. Here you are, Doc. You've done much. You have been serving for a long time. And you've seen the changes that your life has afforded in others. You've seen some of the fruit of the transition, as I said, that precious thing that I
Yes.
call birth, where someone, their old perspective has changed as you are having a conversation with them. Invite us to one of those times that you can remember when someone was in a dark place and you may have been talking with them for weeks and whatever. But one day they are able to put themselves, and Doc had talked about different states, the wave, theta wave, delta, and all those things. Learn to put yourself in states. Meditation does that. It'll put your mind in states that will help you to receive quick. And so one of those places is a place of rest. When you study all those scientists and you go into all their life, Tesla and Benjamin Franklin, all those guys, when they were working on something, they pulled away. And when they went into a place of theta, play and rest, the answer came. And so find your theta state. Talk to me about when you were having that conversation with someone, when they transitioned and you saw it and you witnessed it and the impact of that on that individual. I know what it does to you, but the impact of that.
The things that I have people do at the end of the roar technique when the bottom belief or what you would call programs is replaced with like a virtue. So something like I'm unlovable to I'm lovable, I'm unworthy to I'm worthy, I accept myself as I am, so to speak. At the end of the roar technique, one of the ways that I do this to anchor the experience in a person's physical body,
Mm-hmm.
because can get it energetically in your body, in your cells. And sometimes if you just even put your hands on your center of your heart now or your lower abdomen, as I'm talking, I can feel the reverberation of my voice. And so that's like another anchoring of the new experience, the new program, so that you relinquish the old. And it's not just an affirmation. There's some energy work that I do to facilitate all of this through the roar technique. But at the end, there's a phrase, and it goes, their hands on their chest and their lower abdomen, and they close their eyes, they take a deep breath, and they go, I've changed. Take a deep breath. I know I've changed. Take a deep breath. And I know I've changed because, and then they say what they know, usually about 3 things that they've changed. And so one person went from not realizing that they had so much shame, and they realized, as we tracked it back to the childhood experience, that their shame was about being born a girl when they felt like a boy inside difficult situation. What happened was, in the womb, the mother and father, the person actually had a memory of them fighting over whether it was going to be a boy or a girl and what they wanted, right? People don't even know that this happens, but the soul in the womb hears all this stuff. And it like formed itself into something that it wasn't, honoring the shame. And then through the work and getting them back to that regressed place in the womb, when they made the decision to be ashamed because they were a girl instead of a boy, we had to change that belief. I know I've changed, and I know I've changed because God made me as I am, or I can't remember the exact things we said. I accept myself as I am. Difference is good. Difference makes us, look at things differently. I'm accepted by my parents, and I'm accepted as the gender that my body, was born as. And this doesn't get this is just an example of one thing. But that belief of I am ashamed, my body is ashamed, my gender is ashamed, that's one very particularly that they came out of and realized that, they're a woman, a girl, and it's totally fine. And that moment with their parents, they took it personally, but it wasn't about them. It was about whatever it was for the parents. And having that separation and being able to get that across, you can see on their face when they claim that they know they've changed and that they are not ashamed, and that they are accepting and tolerant of themselves, and that they're apologizing to their body for judging their body and all these different things. There's a lightness in that acceptance and love, and watching the love come back into their mind, body, spirit for themselves.
Yeah, that's beautiful. All the things that you were just talking about as you were saying it started dancing in my head about the importance of things that I read about: laying on of hands, transference of energy. People get healed that way. We see that in church. We see that in many different things. Laying on of hands is important. Words. I remember the story again with Jesus. The centurion soldier came to him. He says, "Hey, my servant is sick." He said, "I'll come over." He says, "Oh, no. I don't need you to come over. Just say it." And so words are important. So what we say is important.
Yeah. And
the man's faith.
Babies in the womb, no matter what you're saying or doing, they still hear it.
The man's faith is important. Your faith, your belief in what's dealing, because Jesus says, I've never seen faith like that ever. So faith is recognizable. It's something that is you. And the other thing, affirmation. I tell people all these things are in the Bible. God comes to this man, Abraham. He says, you're going to be a father of many nations. His name is Abram. And for a year or so, Abram thought that he was going to do it. So he and his wife cocked up this story and came up with Ishmael. But God had to change his mind. So God comes and he has this way of how he's going to change his mind, which will change everything. He changed his name from Abram to Abraham. Abraham means a father of many nations. So God changed his name to what his confession was. And then the next thing we know, Sarah and him has a kid. And so all of these things, that tools that Doc mentioned, she mentioned it, all of them in one package, one story. And I wanted to dissect that and bring it to pieces, in different pieces, so you can see what she was talking about. But it all matters. It all matters. Learning how to say the right affirmation, laying on of hands. What are you doing? You're stirring up the energy that is you, your faith, all of these things, your belief makes a difference. What you say, all of those things are very important. So be mindful of what you're saying because you are listening. Be mindful of what you allow people to say to you because you are listening. We have a perfect example of this being in the body of the mother heard something and made a decision.
Right.
Be mindful of
Mm-hmm.
your world and be very, very attentive to it because it is you. It will form you and it will produce outcome. Doc, here you are. It's 2025. And the world is spinning all over the place. I'm hearing it from everybody. I cannot tell you the things I'm hearing. But when you are with God and you are with Him and He is moving with you and you are with Him, sometimes He lays things on your heart. And people will say, there's this heaviness on my heart. What is the heaviness on your heart as you're seeing mankind today? And your work in relations to your work and seeing the behavior of us crazy folks and all of that, what is it doing to you and the heaviness of your heart that God is putting in there for you?
The heaviness is what I see. I see so many people struggling, whether it be financially, relationally, mental health wise. There's so many things going on in the world, wars going on. I don't want to get too political, but like all the DEI programs and being removed, or just certain populations being exiled or banned or restricted, rights being removed. Like these things really, really hit my soul and it hurts. And it hurts and I don't like it. And when people are hurting, I don't like it. I just think the world is better when people aren't hurting. It's really that simple. But it seems like the domination of wanting to dominate, just that energy is more prevalent right now than it maybe more prevalent because we're all paying attention to it. Maybe it's always been there, probably has always been there. But I do get worried for the kids. I think there are a lot of really sensitive children coming up in this world today that are different and even more sensitive than I was when I grew up. And I think the attack on people's liberties has an impact on our younger population.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
And really cultivate problems in the future. And I think we're seeing a lot of that with all the neurodivergence and things like that. I think this world is getting very toxic and people, especially here in America, there's a lot of things going on.
Yeah, there's a shift.
I don't like it. Yeah.
There's a shift.
I like the awakening that I'm seeing too. But I don't like that we have to actually go through it. But I feel like it's building to something and it's going to break free. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it's going to be big, and I think it's going to be good, but I think it's going to be a while before we can really see that happen.
This is going to be a long time. As I am before the Father, data is being given, and the data this is going to be a long time and lots of pain. But we are here in the thing, the Bible says, let your light shine. So let's shine, Doc, because we got to shine as it gets a little... the light is dimming, but let's shine bright and show the people the way so that they can obtain their freedom. Guys, you have been listening to us for a little over an hour, and we are going to provide all the links for you to have to reach Doc. This has been a lot of fun for me. Even before we started, we had a lot of fun. And I have learned much from her, and I hope you did. And I always suggest that people go back in and listen to some things again because your soul needs to hear it. Jesus says, those who have ears, let them hear. Again, there's a thing from the Bible that guides towards that inner man that we have to pay attention to. So allow yourself the opportunity to become desperate enough to give him an opportunity to express himself. Doc, thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you so much, Ken. You really are a beautiful soul, and I really enjoyed this conversation with you. And I'm so glad you're out in the world doing what you do.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, And of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.